So this is what it is.
Hi, it's me, Joss Whedon, with my exciting and possibly sleep-inducing audio commentary on yet another episode, this one being Hush, which was one of our best episodes of the season. At least we thought so.
About the thoughts and experiences that we don't have a word for.
Episode opening with
Demonstration.
one of my favorite things to shoot, which is a dream sequence.
Come on down to the front here.
I love dream sequences, whether or not they reveal themselves right away, because they just work on their own internal kind of poetic logic.
Girl, one assumes.
But what is that Flintstone-looking shirt that Sarah Michelle Gellar is wearing in this scene? It's one of the things that didn't really bother me at the time, and then I saw it in the footage and said, it's Pebbles and Bam Bam. What the hell was I thinking? But, you know, that's the problem with television. You can't control everything. See how many people there are in the background there. I wanted as many people as possible for this kissing scene, so I filled up the aisles with people. We brought people down from the production office. If you look very carefully while Buffy is sitting in the top left-hand corner, I think you can see Andy Hallett, who went on to become the karaoke demon on Angel. Everybody who happened to be there that day basically got shoved into those seats so that we could really get the sense of them having to kiss in front of a giant crowd. Now, they have never kissed on the show, so this is a big deal. So big, in fact, that it does, in fact, make the sun go down. We're into classic dream sequence stuff. We get to make with the creepy. And nothing's creepier than a little girl singing a little nursery rhyme about the bad guys. Needless to say, A Nightmare on Elm Street did this better than anybody. But it was fun to sort of come up with a little rhyme for the girl. To talk a little more generally, what we're dealing with here. I, early on, wanted to, had considered the idea of doing an episode where people don't talk for a while. As the show went on, I got more and more obsessed with it because I felt that as a director, I was sort of degenerating. I was turning into kind of a TV hack, over two shot, you know. Shot of him, shot of her, them talking to each other, then shot of the both of them, then back. And I was sort of beginning a little bit to fall into a shorthand. And the one thing that I don't love about TV is that a lot of it is what I refer to as radio with faces. It's, you know, if you want to shoot a scene quickly, you just put somebody up against a wall, have them say their lines, and boom, it's done. And from the start, one of the most important things about Buffy was that I wanted the show to work visually. So much so, in fact, that a Fox executive told me I was putting too much visual information on every page, that it was not going to be possible to shoot it, and in fact has always been a great struggle. But a struggle well worth, because it is great when, you know, you have something that is visceral and visual and cinematic and not just people a-yakking, although people a-yakking can make for great shows sometimes.
Romantically?
I'm not saying a word.
Meanwhile, as the show went on, this being the fourth year, I had sort of fallen into the people a-yakking, you know, I can just sort of do this without really thinking about it, and style of directing a little bit, and I wanted to curtail that in myself. And so, on a practical level, the idea of doing an episode where everybody lost their voice presented itself as a great big challenge, because I knew that I would literally have to tell the story only visually, and that would mean that I couldn't fall back on tricks. Like, this is a very simple scene. Over him to her, over her to him, over two shot. It's one of the few, well, actually the whole first act is pretty normal in that sense. And that's the kind of directing that it's fine, it gets the point across, but I wanted to do something harder. And as is typical of me, I wanted to do something harder in the middle of the season when everybody was already exhausted.
Say that.
Yeah. Fortune favors the brave.
Fortune favors the brave. That's a phrase I got from Rick Griffin, a Grateful Dead artist who had it plastered over one of his surfboard drawings. He was a great big surfer and a great artist, and that always stuck with me. And of course, Buffy here using it ironically because she's too chicken to kiss her new love interest. Getting back, anywho, to the general of it, I decided, I would go through Act 1 with people talking and have them lose their voices at the end of the act and then play the rest of the show as much as possible with no dialogue. And what was fun about it, which I experienced again later in Restless and again later in Once More with Feeling, was the absolute surety that I would completely fail, that this could not be done by me, that nobody would put up with it, that people would get bored or confused or bored or possibly just bored.
It sounds vaguely familiar. You sure it's...
So I came into it with real terror in my heart, which is a wonderful, wonderful feeling to have on a television show because it means you're actually doing something new.
One of your prophetic dreams. Well, it could...
What's more important about it all was that as I was writing it, I discovered, having outlined the entire thing and knowing exactly what was going to happen, I discovered what it was about, which I had not figured out while I was figuring out the story. That came to me as I was writing it. I had a general notion that what it was about was the idea that when people stop talking, they start communicating, that language can interfere with communication because language limits. As soon as you say something, you've eliminated every other possibility of what you might be talking about. We also use language to separate ourselves from other people. We also use language as white noise. There's many ways. We also misuse it horribly. All of those things appear in the show because once I realized that the episode was about communication, I then found that absolutely everything I wrote was completely on theme. That is to say, every line of dialogue it embodies the theme of the show. Hey, they're having a weird hair phase. Because
Talk about it now.
because it's about language.
If you don't know how I feel about
I don't.
And so I deliberately put in things, everything being about the way language can be annoying. For example, in this scene, we learn Xander can't express himself. He can't tell Anya how he feels because he's not that kind of guy.
in front of my friends.
Oh, we're not your friends. Go on.
And she, of course, says something inappropriate because her understanding of language is very rudimentary and straightforward and like it's her second language, which it is because she's a demon, ex-demon.
What?
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 I'm not staying
So
with him.
that works thematically as well. Also, the fact that everybody keeps talking and Giles just desperately wants people to shut up,
The most appalling thing you could have said.
and can't take all the noise. That's
If he says to me, he's gonna get tied up again.
That's in there as well. So later on in the Wicca scene, the misuse of the word empowering that'll come up. Again, language used incorrectly. People just using it to block themselves from expressing or not knowing how to express themselves. All of these things fed into the main theme in a way that nothing I write will ever. Again, it is so inevitably coherent because it's about not writing, but about talking.
I mean, we need money for the dance recital, and I do an empowering lemon bun.
Love these girls. Love the whole idea of the Wicca group as being a great big bust, as being just, we are earthy and crunchy and useless.
Over my woman power shrine.
Well, this is...
This scene is also, of course, close to my heart in a big way for the other obvious reason. Seth Green, who played Oz and was Willa's love interest and is a great actor, left rather abruptly. And we weren't sure where to go. And then she, Amber Benson, appeared and sort of made up our minds for us.
On our broomsticks.
Certain stereotypes.
We had the idea of introducing the character of Tara, the very shy girl who
No offense.
falls for Willow.
Maybe we could...
Yeah.
fairly early on, we thought college is the sort of place where people sort of expand or explore their sexuality, and the idea of somebody who thought Willow was great was interesting to us, and the idea that
So not stellar, huh?
basically we had a new Willow, because Willow had become so self-confident and at ease with herself. You know, she wasn't as helpless as she used to be, and so we wanted somebody, particularly for this episode, who could act as a kind of Willow character, somebody we would be invested in, who could be put into danger, who would not necessarily know exactly how to take care of herself off the bat. Because you need somebody like that, and Willow and Allison herself had both matured to the point where, you know, it took a lot to get them into that kind of peril.
Riley, you two seem pretty snugly after class.
Amber Benson, you know, obviously a mainstay of the show now, and their relationship extraordinary. Didn't know for sure. I was thinking of somebody more physically like Allison, smaller and less womanly than Amber. And it was Marty Noxon when Amber auditioned who said, you know, she knew the physical type I was thinking of because I really wanted that vulnerability. And she said, I think, you know, Amber's got it in spades. And so we brought her back, and, you know, she knocked us out. So Marty gets the kudos for that one, although I like to take the credit whenever Amber's around. So make sure Amber doesn't hear this. This is yet another one of my long takes. I love to do long takes that go through as many visual areas as possible, that started vertically, and they go behind, they go in front of, they go around. We didn't actually have that much space, but I wanted to take them as far as possible in one shot. I did that also at the beginning with Giles and Spike.
Riley Finn.
There's a bit of the Woody Allen in that, because I like the way he will use a frame as long as it can be used. I'm not thinking so much of the, you know, Brian De Palma, in your face, look, I'm still moving the camera kind of shot, so much as making a frame usable for as long as possible. Now, most TV directors can't do that because they don't know what an executive producer is going to want to cut. If a show comes in long, something's got to be cut out. So if they do everything as a oneer, as we call it, one long shot, and then the director wants to cut out part of it, the producer wants to cut out part of it, we're in huge trouble.
Take 7 what?
But because it's my story, it's my show, it's my world, to such a large extent, I know when I can afford to do that. I don't have to get the close-up on every scene, the different shots. I can do stuff in one shot if I know I have the room to keep it and I'm not going to cut into it, which gives the frame a kind of confidence, which is a great thing, because the more you can accomplish in one shot, the better. It keeps you in the reality. It's a good thing. This was a clock tower that we built on the Universal lot, which actually has a clock tower, but it was a famous one from Back to the Future and not right for our purposes. This was an old house that our production designer, Kerry Meyer, turned into a clock house. And then they built this interior clock house set, which I think is one of the most beautiful things we've ever seen on the show. When we produced this, it was unlike anything we'd done. Just this small thing, cut away to, you know, small boy in a house somewhere, to an old man in a house somewhere. These are all things, you know, you have to build the room or find it. You have to get the actor. You have to, you know, they're all things that you don't do as much. We'll light entire spaces in this and only use them for a few seconds. And in television, you just don't have time to do that. I love this effect, too. It's a beautiful effect of all the voices going towards the tower. And this is where, you know, Chris Beck really gets to kick in. We'll talk more about him in a bit. And we'll talk more about these guys, because they're so pretty. Now we get to the heart of the piece. The part that I really didn't think I could sustain. We came in a little bit long I would have kept as much of this as possible as it was. You know, I had to keep cutting into it. But it's nice to know that the Slayer actually has to go to the bathroom in the morning like a normal person. Again, the mundane is what I'm going for here. You know, seeing the process. I get up, I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I do this, I do that. I notice something slightly wrong, but I don't really figure it, so I move on. Just the sort of daily routine stuff so that when we get to the part, and how about them jammies? Okay, I'm just saying. You know, one of the great pairs of jammies of television history. Playing this moment was extraordinary. Because it was our first experience. Although this was not the first scene we shot, so it wasn't their first experience with doing this, but it was still early on. And it's a different kind of acting that everybody had to go through. And one of the things we learned in Giles's apartment, which we'll look at later, is how to create moments, separate moments, without the standard dialogue. This scene, by the way, between Spike and Xander was shot on a second unit by David Solomon, who's our in-house producer-director, very talented guy, and one of the few guys I would trust with any of the scenes because there was so much to shoot that I had to be off shooting another scene for the show at the same time. Here's an example of a huge set being lit and then barely used. Again, that's not something you do that much in TV. In TV, if you're going to light a huge set like that, it's because you're going to stand around and talk for a while because it takes a long time. That took a very long time to put together. That's a couple big shots. And all they were really doing was getting us from one place to another.
Vocal code not accepted. Please state your name for vocal identification.
The little dialogue that appears comes from machines, and from newscasters, which are like machines. So it adds, I think, to the creepiness a little bit, and occasionally gives me a shortcut, which is nice.
Override code incorrect.
The inevitable, come on, from the guy behind him. And the very classic sense of guys with their, being very together, completely getting it wrong in a state of emergency, thinking they're behaving incredibly rationally and actually just panicking. Getting a whole room or a whole town full of extras to act as though they're distraught and really be in the moment. Difficult. A lot of these people are extras we've had since the beginning, and we've worked with them for a long time, so that was good. But the big crowd scenes were very difficult. The idea that the bank is closed but the liquor store is damn well open. Where the guy ran into, there is nothing behind that door, so he just had to hide behind that door. This is our backlot set, which I opened up on a fairly wide lens so that we could see as much as possible on a smaller kind of a set. Religious craziness going on the moment there's a problem, and of course rampant capitalism the moment there's a problem. I can't help but think now as I look at this of people selling, American flags within 5 seconds after the World Trade Center incident. The girls coming in with message boards was one of my favorite cute moments. You notice the little thing from Anya there. Does he care more about them than me? To highlight the whole idea of her relationship with Xander not being defined yet. And then Willow's insistence, oh my God, I know exactly what I must do. And it being something so mundane. Allison Hannigan, cutest creature on the planet. There's always useful. I have often thought of her as a silent movie star because she has such giant eyes. I think back in the day she could easily have been one.
Apparently the entire town
And actually, in this she is. So, in your face, pal. Actual newscaster, the guys at the local WB affiliate, always great. Always fun to use them because we use them in amends for a newscast as well. They're very game and they're very good at it.
In the meanwhile, Sunnydale has effectively shut down. All schools and businesses will be closed.
This was the first scene that we shot as a group, and what was interesting was, as I was saying before, people having trouble figuring out the moments, figuring out how to let things progress without using the words as their milestones. When they first played the scene out, it took about 12 seconds because everybody did everything all at once because they didn't know how to wait, how to act, in a silent movie. So it was just a question of learning, and by the time we finished that scene, the learning curve was complete, and everybody had a sense of it's okay to wait. It frightened them, the idea of waiting. It frightened me a lot more. This whole thing was frightening to me, and in fact, this scene embodies that, because the one thing that I knew when I came into this was that this was going to be the episode where Buffy and Riley would have sex. We knew they were going to get together around the middle of the season, and I figured, okay, Buffy and Riley will get it on in episode 10, and that'll be 3 minutes of silence I know people will want to watch. Unfortunately, as we came closer to the episode, I realized it's too early. They can't sleep together. They're not ready. It wouldn't be right. It's not earned. And I lost my crutch. I was terrified. I really felt like, oh God, now I really can't write this. There's no way I'm going to be able to maintain. How do I make jokes? How do I do anything? But I did have their first kiss, and I thought that was worth something, although it's not 3 minutes long. This also introduces the Buffy Riley love theme, which I particularly love. Chris Beck's great work. I think it's actually, for my money, better than the Buffy Angel love theme, which is very straight-ahead romantic. This has a plaintive quality that's a little bluer and stranger. Maybe it points to the way the relationship is going to go, but to me it's more adult than the very straightforwardly romantic Buffy Angel theme. I love the Buffy Riley theme. I think it's some of Chris's best work. Getting now to the real introduction of my boys, which, to talk about them practically, we hired mostly mimes and guys who had done creature work. Here they're suspended on wires. Here they're suspended on a giant rig set up by our stunt coordinator. And then in the next shot, you'll see the ones in the background are on the rig, and the ones in the foreground are on movable dollies that could be pulled or put on a track that our special effects designer Bruce Minkus worked out. They're very useful. They're being pushed on those little dolly trolleys, which looks just extraordinary. They're being pushed onto the Universal lot because I wanted to get a real sense of the neighborhood, not just our tiny little backlot street, but a whole world going on. Fina, who plays Olivia, is useful here in the way that Tara is, because I needed people who would be, if not helpless, then not as savvy and canny about everything that's going on as our people. People who could, in fact, possibly be expendable. People who could be in real terror of what is going on, real childlike terror, because it's something they've never really experienced before. And so, the scariest moments were reserved for Tara and for Olivia. This one coming up being, one of my favorite truly scary moments I ever got to shoot. They're floating. They're nearby and they see you. I believe Don Lewis is the name of the fellow who did that hand. Also did some mime work, and I said to him, "Give me Nosferatu on the hand." Up it came, curled like a spider. He knew exactly what I meant when I said that. All of these guys were great to work with. The tall one there is Doug Jones, the shorter one Camden Toy. And they both were so frightening in the room, just in broad daylight, pretending to do this without any makeup on, that I knew they would be great, and they add a huge amount to their performance. There again, they're on wires, and then after that, back on the dolly. I believe there's one more shot of them where we suspended them with wires. Very difficult. This was, in fact, the last thing we shot, was the scene of them coming down the hall. They have the footmen there to do the dirty work, basically, because I felt the more dreamlike these guys were, they would not sully themselves with such things as struggling with a victim, and the idea that they float at you, as well as fairy tale I was going for, dreams. We're coming upon what I believe is the most dreamlike image of the whole thing. And finally, a character who is actually expendable. I don't actually like to hurt people, which makes me very bad at making horror shows, but in this particular instance, I had no choice. I had a particular mission here, and that was to traumatize little children. This is an image from a dream of my own, the man floating at me as I lie in bed. So to shoot it from a POV, again, more difficult than normal in television because we had to shoot the ceiling, which meant we had to put a ceiling on the set, which they don't usually have because that's where they put the lights. Beautifully lit by Michael Gershman, too, for maximum creepiness. My favorite thing about these guys is how polite they are. What I basically set out to do, and I realized that it's very ambitious, was to have a generation of children say, "Do you remember the gentleman from that episode of that Buffy show? That traumatized me," the way I and my generation always talk about the Zuni doll in Trilogy of Terror with Karen Black. I wanted something that creepy. And I think I got it with my boys. Talk a little bit about the gentleman. What I was going for with the gentleman was very specifically a Victorian kind of feel, because that to me is very creepy and fairy tale like. The politeness, the suits, the crazies who are like the crazies in the asylum in Dracula. You know, the metal teeth as sort of representing, science defeats, cavities by, everything is very sort of, Victorian era. To me, that just bespeaks total creepiness, and it is very classical. When I designed them, because I drew a very specific picture of what I wanted from the gentleman, which was realized beautifully by John Vulich, our makeup effects guy, and Todd McIntosh. I was drawing on everything that had ever frightened me, basically, including the fella from my dream, Nosferatu, Pinhead, Mr. Burns, anything that sort of gave that creepy feel. We get into a lot of reptilian monsters and things that look, kind of like aliens. And what I wanted from these guys was very specifically, and again, I say it here, fairy tales. I wanted guys that would remind people of what scared them when they were children. I believe the thing that scares us most when we are children is old people, is the idea of age. I love the idea also that Giles brings his own theme music to his slideshow presentation. This scene actually fell out very quickly in the writing. I remember sitting in the restaurant thinking, okay, I've got the exposition scene, and Giles, in Restless, he has to sing it. In this one, it's a slideshow, but poor Tony always gets the exposition scene where he explains everything, and to have him have to do it with a slideshow was great fun, and Tony did more with his slides than I ever expected, so it was great. But thinking that this was going to be a difficult scene to write, I then found that everything fell into place really quickly. There is so much you can do, so many fun miscommunications. The drawings by the art department I love because for their sort of childishness. Giles not a professional artist, but big with the gore. Choosing the music for this scene was very difficult, and I think it's Sasson, but I can't actually remember what we used. We went through about 7 different classical pieces and watched the entire show. The infamous gesture from Buffy. Why did they let us get away with that gesture? But all very innocent, of course, and my feeling. Nobody who doesn't isn't old enough to understand it will be bothered by it. But finding the right music meant, just listening to it and finding something that worked out. Like Allie again, proving that a great silent comedian has been lost to us by the introduction of sound. Now this scene, again, easier for me to write than I expected, and not just because there's a lot of written word, but just because there's so much fodder with these characters. I believe the hips thing was actually pitched by Sarah. That drawing she thought the drawing made her look fat, which a classic actress reaction, but a very funny little moment. And this scene, this shot, gotten much later, off somewhere else, difficult to get, but hits home the connection between her and the evil. We have the classic male response to the situation, which is guns, guns, guns. Okay, taser guns. Again, the Universal backlot where we shot a lot of this stuff. Has a good Sunnydale feel, very old-fashioned and neighborhoody. Mark is somebody else who reminds me of the old days because of his has a very calm but expressive face. Gives me a kind of a Charles Parnell kind of a feeling. And here we're getting more and more into the terror of it. That was a big one that we had to cut into at that close-up because we were short on time, but the important thing was we got to have the little girl wandering through the woods. This being my first experience working with Amber, it was such a delight because she gives you so much. She can even fall down, the classic, but which drives me crazy when girls do that in stories, but it's so perfect for this kind of fairy tale, classic, old movie, nightmare, all those things wrapped up in one moment. And then the boys just a coming for her. So happy, so polite, such nice guys. Again, mimes. Gotta say, my making fun of mimes went down by about 40% after seeing this show because working with them, because they brought so much character. They were so used to working with no voices. The idea that society is crumbling, that everybody's too frightened to help her, very important. And the helplessness and the vulnerability, and yet the strength in Amber, you can see them all already. And she will wander through many, many halls in this show, and they will all be the same hall, because we only had one hall. Oops. Slight moment there of Buffy strapping on her fighting boobs. Sometimes the stunt matches were not 100%. Now, this was actually shot in an old house on that where the clock tower is, but actually it was the one next to it. The clock tower was too small, and so we built the interior here. We get to see Riley whooping some ass, which is always fun. And Mark doing all his own stuff. We did have a really good stuntman there, but Mark, one of those guys who just loves to get in it. This, the classic mislead, a la Silence of the Lambs. Yes. No, actually, that isn't the door that Willow opened. Injured Willow, therefore making her a little more helpless. And We finally got the two of them together. The slow motion come through the slats thing, which really didn't work that well. And we filmed it a bunch of times. We were like, well, it just doesn't work that well. Well, that does. Bit of a John Woo moment, but also a big emotional, hey. And, hitting the theme through violence, fisticuffs, and the pointing of weaponry, that people aren't always honest about who they are. And that sometimes when they shut up, they learn more about themselves and each other than they expected to. This was another fight we really went to town on. Sarah doing her own high kick. She's got a great extension there, which is useful. She can sell a fight, however much, whether she's just making an expression or whether she's actually doing a bunch of stuff, like swinging on the rope, which she does. She really puts you there. Yes, this is Riley also realizing this girl is stronger than perhaps I thought. The cup o' blood. James going for that. This was another of the scenes that involved, very tricky sort of setting up so that it didn't seem completely contrived. But then came to a great resolution. Xander reveals his true feelings for Anya by beating the hell out of Spike, which is just adorable. And then, of course, it leads to the other great gesture of the episode, which the network had a bit of a problem with. But we also get to see Emma's transition here and her realization that he really does care about her, which is, I think, one of the sweetest moments in the whole show. And then, of course, that, which the network's reaction was much like Giles's, but they let us keep it because it was just too damn funny. Now, this is another pretty well-known scene, the "we can't move the drinks machine" scene. Some people took this as a sign that they would definitely have a relationship. Some people didn't, but it is meant to be a very sensual and very powerful image between two women, whether or not, and we hadn't at this point decided how far the relationship would go. But we wanted this to be a moment that was, very physical and very empowering and very beautiful between the two of them. And it set off some fireworks. It also moved the drinks machine. It's a very empowering statement about love. Two people together can accomplish more than when they're alone. A great deal more than the sum of their parts. Looking back at it now, knowing everything we've done since, it seems there's no other way we could have gone. It really is one of the most romantic images we've put on film. This, again, is the clock tower set that we had on stage, the upstairs, which was just kind of a nightmare to shoot in. There was so much to do, but very pretty. Very pretty. Ooh. I never get tired of that little gun thing. I wish we still had it. The inevitable big-ass fight, and you'll see, of course, that I separate things. Buffy at one end, Riley at the other. That's so I don't have to get everything happening all at once, because if I cut into one and then it's tied into the other, I'm in a mess. This means I don't have to have both actors there at the same time. It's just more useful. actually deigning to stab her. And her realizing the box from her dream. And us putting a flashback in so other people do too, because it wasn't very clear. And the big moment. Here he goes. I just love that. His little smile for approval when he gets it wrong. This scream, not Miss Geller's own, although she did scream her head off. We ended up Foleying in somebody else's for the sustain. That one shot, that long shot, took an hour to film. The heads blowing up took a long time too. And is one of the grosser things I've ever seen, but also very gratifying. But that one tiny shot you saw of the whole place, I wanted, because we'd separated things into little sections, I wanted to really establish that space. But it took so long to light it
We could do a spell.
that it nearly killed us. But again, everybody who worked on this episode worked harder than they ever had, because we knew we were doing something, pretty special, pretty unique, and we had a feeling at the end of it like we had never had at the end of an episode. People were shaking hands like we'd finished a movie, even though we were all coming back the next day to shoot the next one, which is, a pretty great indication that something is going right. This scene we had to cut into. It was originally longer, but the show did come in long, but we found that everything we needed to say had been said just by the interplay between these two.
She had a lot of power.
The love is readily apparent. And in fact, 10 episodes later, when Willow actually refers to Tara as her girlfriend and we got all the angry letters and emails, my first comment was, where were you guys for the last 10 episodes? Did you see them join hands? Did you see them float the rose? Did you see the spell in Who Are You? Their love has always been extremely physical and sensual and earthy and,
So would you say this was,
anybody who missed it, even though at the time we weren't sure if we were only going to play it on metaphor level, soon became apparent, we couldn't just do that. But anybody who missed it from the start hasn't seen very many films.
So everything you told me was true?
well, no.
Poor Giles has trouble keeping a girlfriend. At least this one lived. But except for the dream sequence in Restless, where we saw a lot of people we hadn't seen for a while, Armin and Seth and Fina as well, she never did come back. The gentleman scared her off. And this is the moment where he realizes it.
Hi.
And here, inevitably, the last scene. There was really only one way this show could end. And that was the idea that once we get our voices back, we stop communicating after we'd been doing so well. It was fun because the next episode picked up at the exact moment we ended this one. But for this one, it was imperative that we ended with, I guess we have to talk. And then neither of them being able to say a word. I think I made a mistake, though, and I realized it a little bit after I'd finished cutting the show. I have the two of them sit there unable to say anything, and then I have the two-shot. I shouldn't have cut to the two-shot last. It gives away the idea that it's the end of the show. I should have just gone off on one of these shots. See, that shot says end of show. I should have cut off on a close-up so you really did expect somebody to speak, and then find out that they couldn't. Well, here endeth. Hope it wasn't boring.
Grr, arg.